Ferrari were cleared, but that is exactly why rivals are furious. After the Imola tire test, teams noticed Carlos Sainz running a different floor specification from Charles Leclerc in a test where experimental parts are supposed to be banned. At least 2 teams wrote to the governing body. Ferrari were investigated, then Ferrari were cleared. But here is the problem. There was no detailed public explanation, no full technical breakdown, and no clear answer for rivals about exactly what is allowed inside a tire test. And this happened in the same season the governing body admitted a major Monaco timing error, where drivers were punished for pit lane speeding by as little as 1/10 of a kilometer per hour because the measurement distance was wrong. So now the paddock is asking the question nobody at Ferrari wants louder. Did Ferrari simply follow the rules, or did the governing body just create another credibility crisis by clearing them without showing the evidence? Subscribe to the channel. To understand why Ferrari being cleared created so much anger, you have to understand what a tire test really is. It is not supposed to be a secret development day. That is the entire point. When a team takes part in a Pirelli tire test, the purpose is narrow. The team helps gather tire data. The tire supplier learns how future compounds behave. The running is controlled, monitored, and restricted because every kilometer in a modern Formula One car is valuable. Real track time is one of the most powerful things a team can have. A simulator can be wrong. A wind tunnel can miss something. Computational models can be adjusted, improved, and refined, but nothing replaces a real car on a real circuit with real tire load, real temperatures, real braking zones, real airflow, and real driver feedback. That is why tire tests are dangerous. Not because they are illegal, because they create opportunity. A team gets the car on track when others are not testing. Engineers get data. Drivers feel the car. Sensors record everything. The temptation is obvious. If a team can learn even a little bit about its own performance while pretending the session is only about tires, that information can become valuable. And that is why the rules are strict. No experimental parts. No hidden development programs. No setup changes designed to create performance information unrelated to the tire work. The test must be for the tires, not for the team. So when rival teams noticed Ferrari using different floor specifications during the Imola tire test, the alarm was immediate. Because the floor is not just another replacement part. It is one of the most sensitive performance areas on a Formula One car. The floor controls how air moves underneath the chassis. It helps create downforce. It affects ride height sensitivity. It changes how stable the car feels in high-speed corners. It influences how much load goes through the tires, how the balance shifts, and how confidently the driver can attack. In the current era, a floor can decide whether a car is alive or lost. So when Carlos Sainz was seen running a different floor specification from the one Charles Leclerc had used earlier in the day, rivals did not treat it as a harmless detail. They saw a possible opening, a possible way for Ferrari to gather aerodynamic information inside a session that was supposed to be about tire development. That is why this story became explosive. Because the question was not only, did Ferrari change a part? The real question was, what did Ferrari learn when they changed it? That is the part rivals care about most. If the floor was experimental, Ferrari could have gained forbidden insight. If the setup was adjusted in a way that created performance data unrelated to the tires, Ferrari could have used the test for something the rules were designed to prevent. If the part was newer, or if the comparison between specifications gave Ferrari useful aerodynamic information, then the entire integrity of the test could be questioned. That is why at least 2 rival teams wrote to the governing body. They wanted answers, not rumors, not paddock whispers, answers. And the governing body did investigate. It requested clarification from Ferrari. It examined the issue. It discussed the matter around the Miami Grand Prix weekend. Then it cleared Ferrari of wrongdoing. That should have ended the story, but it did not, because the explanation did not arrive in the way rivals wanted. The reported explanation was that the floor used by Sainz in the afternoon was an older specification, one Ferrari had already raced earlier in the season. The change was said to have happened because Leclerc's newer floor was damaged during the morning session. If that is true, Ferrari have a logical defense. A damaged part had to be replaced. The replacement was not experimental. It had already been raced. The test continued within the regulations. That is the cleanest version of Ferrari's case. But Formula One teams do not only care about the cleanest version. They care about the proof. They care about the detail. They care about whether the same explanation would be accepted if another team did it. And that is where the frustration began, because the governing body did not publish a detailed public technical explanation. It did not give the paddock a full breakdown of the floor specification, the damage, the replacement history, the data limits, or how it verified that Ferrari gained no forbidden performance information. Ferrari were cleared, but rivals were left without the full reasoning. That is a dangerous outcome, because in Formula One, a private explanation can calm one case, but a public explanation defines the rule for everyone. Without that public clarity, every team is left guessing. If a part is damaged during a tire test, what exactly can be fitted? How old does the replacement need to be? Does it matter if the replacement creates different aerodynamic behavior? Can the team compare the data afterward? What telemetry must be restricted? What data must be separated from the tire program? How does the governing body know the team did not learn something useful about its own car? Those questions matter because every team will face similar situations eventually. And if the standard is unclear, rivals fear the rules become flexible only for the team already under suspicion. That is why Zak Brown's call for transparency became so important. He was not only asking whether Ferrari were guilty, he was asking the governing body to show the process. Because the process is what protects trust. A team can accept a rival being cleared if the explanation is detailed enough. It may not like it, but it can understand the line. It can go back to its own engineers and say, this is allowed, this is not allowed, this is how the governing body judged the case. But when the explanation is thin, the line stays blurry. And blurry lines are where Formula One politics lives. That is why Ferrari's situation became so uncomfortable. They may have done nothing wrong, but because the governing body did not fully explain the decision publicly, Ferrari remained surrounded by suspicion. The verdict protected them legally, but it did not protect them politically. That is the worst kind of clearance. Cleared by the rules, still questioned by the paddock. And that tension connected directly to the wider atmosphere of the 2026 season. Because this was not happening in a calm championship. It was happening in a season already full of arguments about consistency, penalties, and trust in the governing body. At the start of the season, there had been a clear shift in stewarding philosophy. Drivers had complained that the rules were too rigid, too prescriptive, and too often applied like automatic penalties instead of human judgment. The governing body listened and moved toward a more flexible approach for minor incidents. On paper, that sounded sensible, but the result was strange. The opening races became unusually quiet from a penalty perspective. Incidents were investigated, but few were punished. By the fifth race, no driver had received a single penalty point on a super license, which was a dramatic change compared with the previous season. Some saw that as racing being allowed to breathe. Others saw it as overcorrection. And once people start thinking the governing body has overcorrected, every decision gets viewed through suspicion. Was that a fair judgment? Was that too soft? Would another driver have been treated differently? Would another team have been cleared? That is the atmosphere Ferrari walked into. A flexible stewarding environment. A paddock already questioning consistency. A technical test controversy. And a clearance without the level of transparency rivals demanded. That is why the story did not fade. Because it was no longer only about Ferrari. It was about whether the governing body could still make teams believe in its decisions. And then Monaco made everything worse. The Monaco pit lane speed controversy became the season's biggest credibility crisis because it was not a matter of interpretation. It was not about whether one driver left enough space, or whether a defensive move was too aggressive, or whether a penalty should have been 5 or 10 seconds. It was a measurement problem. Drivers were penalized for pit lane speeding by tiny margins. In several cases, the measured excess was just 1/10 of a kilometer per hour. At first, the governing body said it found no abnormalities. Then, after Alpine forced a review, Formula One management admitted the distance used to calculate pit lane speed was inaccurate. A barrier had moved. The route was shorter. The timing loops had not been recalibrated. The speeds had been over-reported. That was devastating, because it proved the official process had missed a factual error until a team challenged it. And once that happened, every other closed decision became easier to question. If a system missed a timing error at Monaco, rivals ask, what else can it miss? If a system cleared Ferrari without a detailed public explanation, rivals ask, how do we know the investigation was complete? That does not mean Ferrari were guilty, but it means the trust around the verdict was weakened by everything else happening in sport. This is the key to the first part of the story. Ferrari's tire test controversy did not explode only because of the floor. It exploded because it arrived inside a season where the governing body's credibility was already under attack. When teams trust the referee, a technical explanation can calm the paddock. When teams do not trust the referee, even a clearance becomes fuel. That is exactly what happened here. Ferrari were cleared, but rivals did not feel satisfied. The governing body investigated, but the lack of public detail left room for doubt. The explanation made sense in broad terms, but the missing technical breakdown kept the controversy alive. And Ferrari, whether guilty of anything or not, became the symbol of a deeper problem. A sport where the line between clever, legal, suspicious, and unacceptable is only as strong as the transparency behind the decision. That is why this story is so dangerous for Ferrari, because they are not just defending a floor specification. They are defending their place inside a trust crisis. And trust is harder to restore than lap time. But the real fire started after Ferrari were cleared. Because the moment the governing body decided Ferrari had done nothing wrong, the case should have moved into the background. The explanation seemed simple enough on the surface. The floor used in the afternoon was not experimental. It had already been raced earlier in the year. The change happened because the newer floor was damaged in the morning. That is the version that protects Ferrari. But Formula One teams do not just hear an explanation and move on. They test it. They pull it apart. They ask what it means for them. And the more they looked at the Ferrari decision, the more the paddock wanted something the governing body did not give them: a full public explanation. That absence is what turned a technical controversy into a political one. Because without a detailed ruling, the rival teams were left in the dark. They knew Ferrari had been investigated. They knew Ferrari had been cleared. They knew there was an explanation involving an older floor and damage. But they did not have the complete technical reasoning written out in a way that defined the boundary for every team.